Okay, so before we go into a little bit more sort of biology and talk about the interest, I want to know, Marissa, a little bit more about your sort of research background. I mean, what are you currently researching anything in particular? Are you just doing a little bit of general croc research, or is there a specific area that you're interested in?
I'm laughing because there was a friend of mine. I gave a talk at Chester Zoo about a year and a half ago, a little over a year. And I gave a presentation. He's like, Marissa, is there something that you don't do? Because I've kind of just put my fingers all over the place, which is great. It kind of keeps me, I don't know, it kind of sparks a little bit more of an interest with me with everything I'm doing. But so my background, for university, I double majored in cultural anthropology as well as zoology. Zoology for wildlife and cultural anthropology. Again, I was just always really interested in the connection between communities and wildlife. And as I had mentioned before, I've always been interested in the history, like how did we get to the point that we're at now, you know? And a lot of that, again, is just understanding that history and the cultural aspect and all that. So when I graduated uni, I literally was like, I'm never going back to school again. Nope, academia is like out of the door. I'm never doing it again. And so out of uni, I got a job at a wildlife sanctuary, and then finally at the Los Angeles Zoo. And I had a great time working with the animals. I did some little research here on the side. And then it was when I was working at the zoo, my boss sat me down one day in the office and was like, oh man, did I do something? Did I forget an animal, or like clean an animal, feed an animal? He was like, what are you doing here? It's like, what do you mean, what am I doing here? You know? And he's like, you're not meant to be a zookeeper. He's like, you need to go back to school. And I don't know, like for me, I just never felt like I was a scientist per se. Mm-hmm. And I was like, and, you know, he just kind of kept talking to me. So I was like, all right, well, let me see if I can get into a program. And I was really interested in parasites. So that was something that at my university, at UC Santa Barbara, my last year in uni, I took a class about parasites. And I just was fascinated how these little creatures, they can change host morphology, they can change their physiology, they can take over their mind. And I just was like blown away. And one thing I always wondered was, how have parasites and crocodilians co-evolved? And how have maybe parasites contributed to crocodilian immunology? Because crocodiles have the second strongest innate immune system in the world. And I had all these questions. And so I was like, if I'm going to go back into school, I'm going to study what I want to study. And I want to study parasites and crocodilians. I want to look at the ecological interaction, the evolutionary relationship. And I am a stubborn person. Like there's some times where, you know, I realize I'm like, okay, I need to be a little bit more complacent, but there are times where I feel like my stubbornness has got me to where I am. And so I contacted all these crocodilian alligator researchers. I want to study parasites and crocodilians. Well, we don't do that. So you got to go look at a parasitology lab. I go to the parasitology labs. I want to study parasites and crocodilians. We don't do that. You have to study what our lab does, which is, you know, parasites and fish. And I'm like, that's boring. And so I was like, this is what I want to do. And I'm not going back to school unless this is what I'm going to study. And my old advisor at UCSB, my old undergrad advisor, was like, hey, there's this professor at UC Los Angeles, and he does parasites and he's done some reptile stuff. Talk to him. He might be open. He's pretty open with what students want to do. And he was like, this is what you want to study, as long as you get the funds for it. He's like, go for it. And that's kind of like what really opened the door, was just having this professor that was just open to what I wanted to do. And I got my master's, I got my PhD, and then I got a National Science Foundation postdoctoral fellowship, which I continued in looking into the relationship between parasites and crocodilians. And with that particular postdoc, it was focusing in Belize. And I had been working in Belize for several years at that point. And it was that postdoc that kind of gave me the ground and just the foothold in Belize to eventually start up the Crocodile Research Coalition.
Awesome. You know what? I feel like we're gonna have to have another sort of takeover just to talk specifically about your parasite research, because that sounds incredible. I mean, I'm same as you. I find it really interesting learning about how something so small can literally take over the body of a host and control it and tell it what to do. Basically, I think that's incredible. So before we dive too deep down that sort of rabbit hole, we'll come back to that in a later date. I've got some. I was told to talk about the anatomy and biology of crocodiles, and I'm assuming there's some real fascinating stuff here. And the two sort of specific areas that Ellie sort of mentioned to me were, is it the scuts and then the heart, if I'm correct? So do you want to tell us a little bit about sort of crocodile anatomy and a little bit of background?
Go for it.
Okay, so from what I remember yesterday, is it?
And I'll
Skews, isn't it?
yeah. I'll fill in.
Okay.
I'll fill in, but you got it. Go for it.
So the crocodile heart. So I don't know whether people did like physiology or that kind of thing at uni, but it's different from all the other reptiles. So all of the other reptiles have a 3-chambered heart, but crocodiles have a 4-chambered heart. And this is specifically because they're so based in water. So they have like valves that can close off the blood and direct it to the right places. So when they go underwater, they can stop the blood flow to their lungs, which means they're more efficient when they're underwater, which I found really, really interesting. So clever. It is just the lungs, or can they cut it off other places as well?
It's the lungs.
It's the lungs, okay. And then obviously they're covered in all of these scutes and armor and things like that, mostly for like temperature regulation to make their surface area slightly bigger, because obviously being cold-blooded, they need to get as much heat as possible to get them going again. And then I know we count the scutes when we're doing research to find out what species it is as well. So between the Morlets and the American, they both have different configuration of scutes on their back and down their tail. And then it's kind of helped us because in Belize, helpfully, the Morlets and the American Croc hybridize, which is a little bit of a puzzle sometimes when you're looking at an animal and it like shares both traits and you're not really sure where it is. So you can identify which one's which or whether it's a hybrid and what traits of each species they have just by counting these scutes down the back, which is really cool. As well, I don't know enough about the ISOs that you talked about and how they use them. So I don't know specifically how to explain ISOs, but they're what they use to know the environment they're in and help them to hunt efficiently.
So ISOs is integumentary sensory organs. So on crocodiles and alligators, it's on their face. It's these little black dots. And then on crocodiles, it's also all over their body on the ventral side. And so these are highly sensitive nerve endings. And so underwater, if there's a fish that's swimming towards the right side, the ISOs on the right side of the face, they're going to start firing off. So it just helps to direct the crocodile to where that particular fish is so it can go ahead and chomp on it.
And like the thing I've enjoyed like learning about from the lecture yesterday was just like, they are just incredible. Like I feel like they've just like reached this peak of evolution where they're like pretty much perfect. Like they're just amazing creatures, like genuinely. I've enjoyed learning about them.
I think I've enjoyed learning these few sort of minutes. I mean, there's Inspire Wilderness says so fascinating. Wild Little Wallace says fascinating. Megan Laylor 95 says she's a mammal keeper and she's finding it interesting. It's incredible learning about these creatures. And I'll ask you both the same question for this one. But as part of the anatomy, what is your favorite aspect of crocodile anatomy? Or what's your favorite part of crocodile anatomy and why?
I'm gonna have to let you go first.
Me? I mean, this is not necessary. I mean, I guess it is anatomy, but like, so I'm gonna say their brain, but it's more connected to their intelligence. So their brain is the size of a walnut. But something that we need to understand is that neuroscientists today, they still do not understand what contributes to intelligence. You know, way back in the day, you know, it was like, oh, the bigger brain. And it's like, nope, because technically compared to body size, these have bigger brains than us. Then it was neuron connections, gray matter, white matter. No one knows still. But so they have these tiny little brain, but they're highly intelligent animals. They can, even a year after, and this is from an experience that I had, a year after not seeing someone, they can identify a person, whether it's through their voice, their smell, how, like, the site of that particular person, and they have the ability to learn. So for all of our crocodile ambassadors, they are going through a target training program. So our blind croc Eamon, so when he came down to us, he was absolutely emaciated. And why he's blind is someone, again, due to misguided facts about crocodiles, he got a machete chopped at his head and it busted out one eye and the other one is permanently damaged. And so he just couldn't, like, even though he had the ISOs, they still need sight to be able to successfully hunt. And so we had to train him to be able to feed him. And so one thing I have trained Eamon, and again, this is something you can see on our social media. We just put a post on our Instagram with Eamon being trained yesterday, but he knows the command come. So I tap on the ground, come, and he comes. And so he uses my voice to understand where he's at. And I have just used my voice for stay, and he knows he needs to stay. I've clicker trained him. So like dog training, I've clicker trained him. He knows he does not get a treat until he hears that clicker and I say target. He also now knows the command smile, smile, and he opens up his mouth. And so this isn't necessarily like a circus trick, but for me, it was, how can we examine these animals without being invasive? And so he opens his mouth and I can take a look in his mouth and make sure that he is illustrating signs that he's healthy, because crocodiles that get bacterial infections, sometimes the inside of their mouth, it'll discolor red or yellow. So ever so often, at least once a week, I like to say smile, so I can just take a nice look into his mouth and just make sure that he's healthy. And then, you do have some particular institutions or zoos, they do train their crocs. It's to build a relationship. It's to mentally stimulate them, because like I said, these are highly intelligent animals. We have all understood this past year what it's like to be in one tiny space for a long time. You go crazy because we're intelligent animals, or just animals in general. And so we conduct this target training, again, for health examinations, to mentally stimulate them, to physically stimulate them, try to get them to walk out and stuff like that. But again, it is building that relationship between keeper and animal. So it's building trust. And again, we've done this with Gilly, Sam, Mad Max, we're definitely doing this with, so she doesn't bite anyone's toes off. That little turtle.
That's incredible. Before we go on to Ellie's sort of favorite anatomy part, just a question that's been sent in by Wild Little Wallace asks, how do the ISOs compare to the ERs? Sorry, I'm really bad at reading that. But in sharks, so how do they compare the two between them?
The ISOs and what was that?
It's the ERs. I'm gonna have to. I'm trying to read my here. I think I put the question up on the screen.
Oh, okay, yeah. It's very similar, actually. It's very, very similar, where it's detecting that weight, in a sense, like wave motion. So yeah, it's very, very similar. Awesome.
Okay, so Ellie, on to you. What is your favorite part of the anatomy of a shark? Crocodile. Why am I saying shark?
I definitely can't tell you about sharks, but Marissa mentioned earlier about their immune system. So their innate immune system is like the second best in the world, which is really cool, because we take samples from their skin for genetic analysis. And I remember arriving and watching it, and our research biologist Jonathan being like, "Oh no, don't worry, they just don't get infected. It just doesn't happen." And something that came up yesterday is people are actually looking into crocodile blood as medicine for HIV. So it was shown to reduce or to bring back T cells that were lost due to HIV infection in humans. So I think like that's pretty cool, and hopefully we can look into maybe using it more, and it gives us more reason to protect the crocodile as an ecosystem service it does for us. I think it's pretty cool. I don't know enough about it, but I think it's sick.
That's cool. That's absolutely insane. I mean, as I say, the animal kingdom, what an incredible place it is. Everything has some fascinating, I mean, as I say, I never knew about that.